All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're going to uncover a pretty wild idea that literally every problem you face in life has one simple, shocking root cause. You just care way too much about what other people think. We're breaking down some seriously revolutionary concepts from a book called The Courage to be Disliked by Ichiro Kishimi and Fumitaka Koga. If you have ever felt, trapped by the expectations of your family, your friends, or just society in general, stick around, because what we're about to explore might absolutely change how you view your own personal freedom.
So, while most of us would probably argue that things like anxiety, sadness, or frustration are just completely natural reactions to a really difficult world, Kishimi and Koga drop a massive philosophical bomb right out of the gate. They suggest that unhappiness is actually a choice. Yeah, you heard that right. They argue that life only feels so complex and overwhelming because we are the ones making it that way. According to them, anyone, literally no matter what their past looks like, has the potential to be happy right this second. The only real difference between happy and unhappy people? Just their willingness to change.
And this brings us to their core argument, which is honestly a bit of a mind bender. They claim there is no such thing as isolated internal worry. None. Because all of our anxieties are always inextricably linked to the outside world and the people in it. Basically, whatever worry pops into your head, the shadows of other people are always there. In short, they're saying that absolutely all of your problems are, at their core, interpersonal problems.
Now, to really wrap our heads around this huge paradigm shift, we have to look at the foundational work of psychologist Alfred Adler. This entire philosophy is built squarely on his ideas. Adler believed that the self is a unified whole. What that means is everything we do, whether it's a physical action, a conscious thought, or even a completely unconscious feeling, it's all purposefully directed at achieving a very specific goal. We aren't just blindly reacting to our past, we are actively moving towards something we want.
And Adler actually takes this a step further. He doesn't even believe in fixed personality traits. He doesn't think you're just naturally shy or naturally an angry person. Instead, he looks at people through the lens of what he calls their lifestyle. Now, in this context, a lifestyle is just a set of habits and emotions that you chose at some point in your life, and you keep choosing them because you believe they're the absolute best way to reach a certain goal. Adler even argues that things like antisocial behavior aren't innate character flaws. They're actually a lifestyle choice used to achieve a very specific outcome. Crazy, right?
Okay, let's see how this works in practice. Imagine someone who really wants a job, but they get so incredibly anxious that they can't even make it to the interview. Conventional wisdom tells us, oh, their anxiety is preventing them from succeeding. But Adler flips this entirely on its head. He says a person doesn't miss the interview because they're anxious. Actually, scratch that. It's more like their true hidden goal is to simply avoid the risk of failing. So they literally manufacture the emotion of fear as a handy tool to help them skip the interview. The fear is just serving their hidden purpose.
Now, a super crucial point here. While negative childhood experiences and traumas absolutely do happen, nobody is denying that. This explainer reveals that we are not determined by the trauma itself. The source material makes this crystal clear. We do not suffer from the shock of our past experiences. Instead, we make out of them whatever suits our current purposes. It is entirely about the meaning we choose to assign to our past right here, right now. Basically, you are the one who determines your own life today, not your past.
Which naturally leads us to a pretty massive question. If we are the ones creating our own emotions to serve our goals, and we aren't actually bound by our past, well, why on earth would anyone intentionally hold on to a frustrating goal that just leads to a miserable life? Why would anybody ever choose to be unhappy?
The answer? It all comes back to our interpersonal connections. Remember earlier when we said all problems are interpersonal problems? Well, your overall happiness depends completely on what you are trying to achieve when you interact with the people around you. Sure, feeling frustrated occasionally is totally normal, but constant, everyday unhappiness? That is a deliberate strategy driven by a fundamentally flawed goal that you've set for your relationships.
Kishimi and Koga lay it out like this. We essentially have two fundamental choices when we deal with other people. We are either seeking their approval or we are aiming to make a positive impact in their lives. And here is the harsh truth. Unhappy people almost always make the massive mistake of setting their main goal in life as gaining approval from others, whether that's trying to impress a boss, a parent, or just society at large.
Now, society constantly tells us that wanting validation is just, normal human nature. But in reality, it is a massive trap. This desperate need usually stems from a reward and punishment style of education growing up. If you're constantly seeking praise, you are actively allowing someone else to judge you by their own yardstick. You end up spending your entire life trying to gauge other people's feelings and acting just to grant their wishes. And ultimately, you end up living by someone else's expectations and completely sacrificing your own freedom in the process.
The really insidious problem with seeking approval is that it relies entirely on other people's expectations, which, let's be honest, are completely out of your control. It is literally an impossible goal. But when earning that approval inevitably becomes impossible, unhappy people don't just drop the desire. No. Instead, they convince themselves that they are inherently flawed. By believing they're just fundamentally broken, they give themselves a handy little excuse to stop trying altogether. It avoids the immediate risk of future rejection, sure, but it keeps them permanently trapped in misery.
Think about what happens when you seek approval. You accidentally turn your entire life into a brutal zero-sum competition. If your ultimate goal is external validation, then seeing someone else get praised literally means you are losing. Suddenly, you start viewing everyone around you as rivals. Someone else's success feels exactly like your own personal failure. And this kind of mindset, it just breeds constant fear and resentment, which absolutely destroys any chance of forming genuinely healthy, supportive relationships.
Just think about it like this. Imagine you throw this elaborate, amazing surprise birthday party for a friend. But then you get deeply offended when they don't do the exact same thing for you on your birthday. If we're being honest, you weren't actually being generous in the first place. You were just secretly using them to get something in return. It's a demand for gratitude disguised as a favor. And when that expectation isn't met, bam, instant resentment. This competitive, approval-seeking mindset completely poisons our relationships with this toxic sense of sacrifice and entitlement.
Moving on to the next section, the power of contribution and finding joy in simply being useful. So how in the world do happy people escape this toxic zero-sum game? They do it by entirely shifting their focus. The crucial takeaway here is that happy people don't find joy in being praised, they find it by genuinely believing that they are useful to someone else. And here's the real secret sauce. You have to decide for yourself what being useful actually means. If you inherently know that you're contributing and bringing value to the table, that desperate need for external recognition, it just completely evaporates. You don't need anyone to pat you on the back because your own self-awareness is entirely enough.
Which brings us to a highly counterintuitive truth. Helping others is not some selfless, painful sacrifice you make just so you can look like a good person. Actually, it's something happy people do primarily for their own benefit and joy. Doing something simply because it makes you feel good is a remarkably stronger, healthier motivator than forcing yourself to do it out of some heavy sense of obligation. It completely removes the anxiety of worrying what others think and builds a very real, genuine sense of self-acceptance.
Building on that idea, you really don't need to do anything extraordinary to be of use. Happy people fundamentally understand that all human beings have immense inherent value. Literally, just by existing, you bring joy to the people who care about you. And because they believe this deep down, happy people are able to fully accept themselves, flaws, mistakes, imperfections, the whole shebang. Their worth isn't tied to constant, exhausting achievement. It is tied purely to their mere presence.
Because they aren't treating life like some desperate, exhausting race for conditional approval, happy people can actually focus on the present moment. So many of us fall into the trap of thinking we need to achieve something massive to finally be happy, but that's an illusion. By finding meaning and joy in the journey itself and recognizing the positive impact you're having today, your life becomes fulfilling right now. In fact, even if it all ended suddenly today, a truly happy person wouldn't feel like their life was wasted. And all of this brings us to the ultimate, incredibly liberating conclusion of this entire philosophy. Are you ready? Freedom is being disliked by other people. That's it. Look, no matter what you do, or how hard you try, it is absolutely inevitable that some people simply will not like you. Accepting that reality and actively choosing to live a life that you believe is good, totally regardless of their judgment, is the exact price you pay for true freedom. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want you to ask yourself a tough question. Whose life are you actually living today? Are you going to stay trapped playing an unwinnable game of trying to please everyone else? Or are you finally ready to claim your own freedom and find the courage to be disliked?